to inspect it.
She just said these are really strange experiences. She was in Judy Woods near Bradford, and she and a friend came across this large structure with propellers going round, but the propellers looked boomerang shaped. It seemed a really curious, massive structure in front of them. And as I looked at it, this light came from it and beamed itself over them.
Hello and welcome back to Paranormal Perspectives. My name is Stan, and tonight we're talking to Nigel Watson about the ufological world, if that's even a word, really. So I'm really excited to have you here, Nigel. Thank you for being here.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. I know you have an amazing story to share, so you're talking about your book, Portraits of Alien Encounters Revisited, and you seem to focus on UK-specific cases. So I know you have a few interesting tales to share, but just before we get into the details, really, my watchers and listeners won't know you personally particularly well just yet. So if you don't mind me asking simply, who is Nigel and what gets you excited?
Okay. Well, what got me excited with UFOs was the space missions in the 1960s. And so over moon landings and over headlines about space exploration, and was a kind of space race going on in the late 60s, between the Soviet Union and the United States. So there's this thing about who was going to get to the moon first. So that got my attention, and like a good fortune, I cut out all the newspaper stories, and in my school library, I cut out a big piece about the Apollo 10 mission or something. And when the teacher picked the paper up and there was a great big hole in it, so embarrassing. I sort of hid away from that. But from collecting newspaper clippings about space exploration, I then went to my local library, got space books and astronomy books. But there was 2 or 3 UFO books, and that's really what caught my attention. And most of them, I think all of the books were American. It's either George Adamski and the contactee type cases where people claimed they'd met humanoid-like aliens and flown in their flying saucers were a bit far-fetched. And then there were more serious Donald Keogh books, which were more like scientific analysis of UFO cases, and they wanted to approach the subject in a serious manner. So I was struck by the fact that they were all American books and cases. But then I realised in my local paper there were UFO sightings reported. So that's when I started investigating cases on my own doorstep. And my own grandmother saw an orange glowing light fly over Scunthorpe. Quite a few other people reported that, so that was probably one of the earliest cases I kind of looked into. And also with it being my grandma, it's a bit easier to find out from her. I don't think I really did discover what that was, but it might have been something like a weather balloon with the sun setting and causing the balloon to look like it was glowing. But nobody really come up with an explanation. And then I kind of got into contact with 1 or 2 people, and we used to talk about UFOs and stuff. And we set up a UFO group, the Scunthorpe UFO Research Society, and we arranged the first meeting, and about 30 people turned up. So there was quite a lot of local interest. For about a couple of years, we had weekly meetings, and we had some guest speakers. And not long after it was set up, we went to Warminster in a sort of dormobile kind of minibus thing. And we just went down to Warminster and stayed in a campsite and went up to Cradle Hill and, did the sky watching thing. And we went to Stonehenge and Avebury and all the stuff, New Agey type sites, really. And although I think this was about 1973, already, frenzy about flying saucers in Warminster had died down. I think it was at its peak in 1965. And so by 1973, it kind of petered out a bit. There's still a few ufologists about. And it surprised me that there was no evidence of UFOs in any of the local shops or anywhere. So if you visited there, you'd get no idea that this was a kind of UFO capital of England. Yeah. So I always thought if that was America, we'd probably have carnivals and parades celebrating it.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, there's a conference on the 24th of August which celebrates the anniversary of the height of interest in the subject, where on a bank holiday in 65, a lot of media came, and I think I read that was about 10,000 people in Warminster over the bank holiday weekend at the end of August. So it's quite nice, like 60 years later, I'm going to go to this conference that they've arranged in Warminster. And it is a kind of milestone of British ufology, really. We don't really have many hotspots. I suppose now Rendlesham Forest is one, because the alleged landing or whatever it was. And then Bonnybridge in Scotland. So, and there's Broadhaven in Wales. So we are adding up a bit, but even so. And so that's what got me really interested, having a sort of local UFO group to speak to other people. We'd share books and everything, and then that's what got me going.
Well, that's amazing. So, yeah, it's like starting off seemingly from a family interest, or more like really a family experience. So, in that, obviously, your family's going to be the most reliable witness of these things. Anyway, they're going to speak to you quite honestly, and from there, you kind of was pulled into it, really. So, like I mentioned before, the recording. We had Malcolm Robertson on a few episodes ago, and he was the one who dealt with a lot of those cases, basically. He was kind of one of the first on the case for a number of those events. And it was at a time when ufology in the UK was pretty much non-existent, really, like, as in just not taken seriously, though, but these events were seemingly happening. So it does take a lot of braveness to really go against the grain and ignore sort of the social stereotypes and stigma, really, to investigate and know more about the unknown. This is actually personally something I've got interested in the last couple of years, because I've had experiences with poltergeist and various different forms of paranormal activity, but for some reason I just assigned alien activity essentially to be something completely separate, though. And not saying it doesn't exist, but I couldn't quite comprehend the idea of things happening outside of Earth and there being this greater perspective. But I've been seeing more and more of these events in the news. I've seen things with was it Dr. Stephen Greer, Luis Elizondo, and you could question as to whether they're genuine or not. Though obviously I can't say just yet, though. But the fact is, a lot of these people are getting people to continue that conversation, share their stories. And there's a few things I've seen myself which has made me begin to question, actually, something is clearly going on here. And now it seems to be there's more of an interest, and even more so in the UK. So I was going to ask you before I get started, really, so I know your encounters that you speak about are mostly UK focused. Is there a difference that you find in experience between UK members and those experiencing them worldwide, or do you find there's forms of continuity there in stories?
Yeah, I think there's a kind of cultural difference. I think it was identified a long time ago that South American contract cases always seem to be more robust. If you read about such cases, the witness often sees an alien. There's a sort of fist fight with them. And they're kind of...
Of course, no, the first thing you would think of.
But being more friendly, like the George Adamski case, where they speak to an alien and get a lot of sort of alien philosophy about protecting ourselves from ecological doom or atomic warfare, that sort of thing. So we're there to sort of warn us about what we're doing to our planet, with our science and technology. Although, having said that, there was the Kelly Hopkinsville case where people shot at these little gremlins, and the incident seemed to be like a Siege, one of these zombie siege movies where they were all these sort of goblin-like creatures that were trying to come into their farmstead. And so I suppose Americans were a bit more trigger-happy in that case. Whereas I think in Britain, where again, they tend to be more like Nordic aliens, the tall, I think we call them the tall whites in America, and tend to be humanoid, but it's not very specific. You know, some people see one type of alien, somebody else will see another type. I think sometimes it depends on the person's own viewpoint. If you've got a negative attitude, you're more likely to see a reptoid or an insectoid and have bad experiences or communications from aliens, whereas the good aliens tend to be the Nordics, humanoids, or even angelic beings. I think that's the thing. There's this kind of blending of the forces of good and evil, which is very much related to religious concepts. And I found a lot of people in my book refer to the Book of Revelations, the apocalypse and that sort of thing, and also to angelic beings who protect humanity. And there's that theme of good and bad, and that, you know, there's some sort of battle out there where the forces of good and bad aliens are sort of working to either protect or invade us. And in a way, I suppose that replicates a lot of things that go on in America. But the interesting thing is that the biggest cases always seem to be American, you know, like the Betty and Barney Hill case or Roswell and, you know, numerous others. Whereas in Britain, our biggest case is Rendlesham Forest, which is very again centering on American military personnel. And it's interesting that there's that thread of the American military being involved in these cases. So it does kind of inspire people to think of government cover-ups and why people are interested in, you know, disclosure and pressure, putting pressure on the American government to release what would know about, you know, reverse engineering of alien technology and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it seems to be there's this growing movement, and I wouldn't exactly say I'm part of it because I don't feel like I know enough just yet. This is why I kind of ask these questions, and like I said, I've seen things myself, but it seems to be this movement seemed to have accelerated around the time of the pandemic, really. So people at that time became more insular, and a lot of people that I know kind of went through like a bit of a spiritual experience, really, where they've challenged their very core beliefs. A certain, maybe a family tragedy may have happened or something personal happened to them in their own individual way. But at the same time, with them being very introspective and looking back at their life and what they've done, they also begin to think, but why am I here? Why am I the only ones, you know, why am I part of the only species here that is conscious enough to be aware of its existence? Like, how come it's just one in this one particular planet that exists where we're in amongst billions, trillions even, of potential habitable planets that could harbour life? It seems like now people seem to think it's kind of crazy to think that we're the only ones out there. Sorry, go ahead.
It's funny, like you talk about COVID, but I think, like the people I spoke to in my book, often it was a UFO event that caused them to think about being beyond our own planet. And I suppose it happened with me with the Apollo missions, and then reading about George Adamski. Like, I suppose in a way I kind of half believed it, but it seemed a bit of a fantasy as well. But whatever it was, it still made you think about, could this be true? And it also is true that we are a very small element in a huge universe, and it does make you think beyond the norm. And I think a lot of people just live day to day and don't really look beyond the even if you're a skeptic, it does give you a kind of better insight into what might be out there, even if you're not a total believer in it. And I suppose I've gone through the beginning. I did believe it because it seemed credible that aliens who came here would investigate our planet just exactly the same way we were investigating the moon. And so it all seemed quite logical. But the problem is, and it's still a problem now, is getting any real evidence. And I suppose the subject kind of petered out a bit in the sort of mid-70s, but you started to get abduction cases in America. And in a way, my book has some early cases that are almost like pre-abduction type cases that don't evolve into proper abductions. But that might be just that I've not used hypnotic regression. I think as soon as you employ hypnotic regression, you start getting fabulous stories about abductions. I think like with the investigations by Tony Dodd, he employed hypnotic regression techniques, or he got people to do it for him. And then he got this classic story of people finding themselves on an examination table and the classic abduction themes. In my own book, I do have a case just like that. Somebody who said when they were 11 years old, they found themselves on an examination table. I think this occurred in the early 80s or something. So people have been reporting similar things, even without hypnotic regression. But I think in my early cases, it was more a case of people seeing mini men in black or 12-foot-high robot or ghostly beings and figures, and getting telepathic communications or communications when they've been in a state of meditation, or even in dreams have had alien messages, things like that. So my book kind of covers the whole gamut, really, of the type of encounters people have, from sort of from seeing UFOs to having sightings of figures and shadowy beings or angelic beings, and so there's so many different aspects to these cases. We're not all following the same stereotype format.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that only intrigues me more, really. So just kind of speaking about the stories that you shared in your book, are there a couple of standout stories that have really stayed with you? And would you be able to walk us through those and maybe just explain kind of what your interpretation of those are as to sort of like how those things came about?
Yeah, one is a chapter on Paula Green. She was featured on the front page of the Daily Star and said, Granny abducted 52 times. And I got into contact with her.
Crikey.
She said, she hadn't been abducted 52 times. She just said she had 52 sort of experiences and encounters, and that she didn't even think she didn't like the term abduction. She felt she'd had these experiences of being taken away and finding herself in a place. But she didn't like to pin it on aliens or anything like that. She just said these were really strange experiences and have been happening to her throughout her life. One of her first experiences when she was in Judy Woods near Bradford, and she and a friend came across this large structure with like propellers going round. The propellers looked boomerang shaped. It seemed a really curious, massive structure in front of them. And as I looked at it, this light came from it and beamed itself over them. And the water in a nearby pond or lake sort of bubbled when the light hit it. So they were really scared by that and ran away. Paula said she ran home and she was shocked to find people looking for her. Apparently she'd lost 4 hours of time.
Wow.
So
Crikey.
Instead of being something like 8 o'clock, it was like midnight. And she kind of got in trouble for being out all night till late at her age. So she still doesn't know what happened in that missing time. But since then, she's had all sorts of really, really odd experiences. One of her abductions was inside a sort of molded room, and she saw a screen of paradise that turned to a disaster and apocalypse, and rivers running dark and everything going downhill. So that's very much something you get in abduction stories, where people are often shown a screen and where they're showing perhaps life on Earth and the universe. It's quite interesting that she fits in with a lot of the other cases like that in America. And I think she's a very credible, down-to-earth person. So when you hear her talking about all these different weird experiences, I think another time she saw a sort of two-dimensional figure who was really tall and had blonde hair and looked to be like the classic Nordic, but she had really smooth skin. There's no wrinkles on him. And he was like a cowboy cutout, but he held her hand and took her for a ride into the sky, a bit like Lois Lane in Superman. But she kept her eyes closed, so she didn't really look down. But that just seems like a really odd experience, which is really hard to believe. But I was looking on a UFO website only a week or two ago, and somebody said, I saw a figure that looked two-dimensional, like a cut-out figure. So I think even if you get a really weird story that you've never heard of before, you can probably look through the literature and perhaps find something very similar. I think that's the fascinating thing about the subject. Was it false memory syndrome or fantasy proneness, or some of the cases could be caused by sleep paralysis, or is it that people are opening their minds to something that's out there? And I think that's what fascinates me about all these high strangeness cases. Some people would dismiss them outright, and like nuts and bolts ufologists might say, oh, they don't really relate to UFOs, it's a load of rubbish, and that it's all fantasy, and that we want to keep to solid, hard UFO sightings with, photography or radar or something like that.
Mm.
So, but it's interesting because the modern day thing about UAPs is that they've introduced a concept of the fact that a UAP is an unidentified anomalous phenomenon. So this anomalous aspect of it has been incorporated. And we talk about non-human intelligences and the fact that UAPs can interact with people and cause them to have kind of psychic communications and telepathic communications. So in a way, nothing's particularly new because this was happening in my book with different people. It's just that UAP is a bit more respectable term, and it's also something that we're using in America to persuade US government to disclose what we know about these and whether we've been in contact with these non-human intelligences or whether they've got all these things like Area 51. But there's been a kind of long campaign by people in the background about this. And it's funny, you were talking about ufology in the 70s, but by the year 2000, people had kind of gone off UFOs because there'd been the X-Files on TV, which was very popular, and obviously about the millennium coming meant that people were excited about something might happen. And when nothing did, ufology kind of died off a bit, really. And then it's only in recent years with UAPs and the release of videos that those subjects kind of took off again. And I think that's the thing. It does come in and out of fashion. So I don't know how long the current bubble is going to stay inflated, really.
Yeah, I have so many questions about those stories. So for one, just talking about that person's experience when they were taken by that two-dimensional being, to us it may look like it's two-dimensional because our perceptions are quite limited, really. I can imagine there are races out there that can see far beyond what we can see. So to me, it just implies that could it be a cross-dimensional entity? So could it be coming from, say, a fourth or fifth dimension and trying to appear in the third dimension? And to us, it may look two-dimensional here because they're arriving from somewhere else, I wonder. So I wonder if they're not simply extraterrestrial, they are extra-dimensional, though. So have you come across the kind of people saying that same thing as well? So they're not just simply in our space, just outside of our time even.
Yeah, one of the first people I interviewed was Paul Bennett, who was a sort of young teenager, had loads of experiences in the north of Bradford, not that far from where Paula Green lives. And as a boy, he had all sorts of weird encounters with his friends. He saw a 12-foot-high robot with another friend of his, and he saw a mini man in black and angelic beings in his bedroom, and he had no load of kind of things like premonitions and that sort of thing. But he was very much keen on the works of John Keel, as a lot of us were in the 70s. And he felt we were, ultra-terrestrial beings that were coming from beyond our own reality, either from some sort of intelligence that's living in parallel with us, but in a different dimension. That's why aliens have been seen throughout our history, because they're part of our own sort of ecology, really. That they're as much part of the Earth as we are. I think one of John Keel's books is called Our Haunted Planet. In a way, we're being haunted by these things. But I think in a way, people like putting labels on things. So calling something ultra-terrestrial isn't much different from calling them an alien or a non-human intelligence. It's just a label, really, because we don't know what these things are. And I think in my book, I'm just trying to present what people have told me about their experiences. I haven't had an agenda to prove that these things are extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial, from other dimensions or anything. So I've attempted just to present the facts and let people decide. I've put some of my own observations at the end, but I think I've put enough information there for people to understand that this is a complex phenomenon and perhaps lots of different phenomenon and different explanations cover a lot of these experiences. Plus, I've supplied references to archives and a bibliography of British UFO books, so that we can, if anyone wants to, they can check out some of the books that can put my cases into perspective as well, because there's quite a body of writing about UK cases, but I think to actually write, you'd have to write an encyclopedia, really. I think John Hanson has kind of done that by collecting lots of historical material and presenting them in chronological order. But, there's still a lot of information out there, and it's quite a lot to take on. And I think it's also a guide for people who want to find out more on the internet as well. But I think the whole subject can be quite overwhelming because, like you say, with all that's going on in America, you think, what's the truth of all this and who can you trust? Because there's so many people coming out of the woodwork as whistleblowers and giving deathbed confessions, and some of it is of utter rubbish, really, or stories that have been repeated for decades. But because of the internet, people, get involved in the subject, and then they're just repeating stories that have been debunked years ago, or hoaxes and that sort of thing. And it's really tricky because I've noticed I've been on YouTube, and the things that get the highest viewings are the things where people are presenting, dodgy pictures of UFOs that are obviously just sort of mundane objects, or, they could actually be AI now, because you can't really trust any photographs even before AI. If you see a moving blob in the sky, it can be interpreted as anything, can't it?
Yeah, because it kind of seems like it's a two-way thing at the moment, isn't it? Because now more people have access to all forms of recording devices, so you can record sound, video,
Yeah.
You can represent a moment in time in greater clarity than ever before. But at the same time, with the advent of AI, then more people have access to changing imagery. So it almost seems like it's perfect timing that, we have the most power to record what we've been experiencing, but at the same time, this thing comes, into fruition that goes against that. And it just almost seems a perfect coincidence, maybe. But yeah, I knew that this has happened throughout history. And when I was going through my UFO binge, when I was beginning to kind of get into this, when I was looking at different cases and trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I believe? What don't I believe? What makes sense? And one part of it was I looked into, have you ever heard the story of the Book of Enoch, if that means anything to you?
What's that story?
It's a curious one. I mean, I don't know if I believe in it just yet, though there's enough information to make me think. So basically, the Book of Enoch is known as the Forbidden Bible. So I think it's one of the books within the Bible series that is forbidden, basically, like it's hidden away. But there is a copy of it out there that people can read quite easily now, and it's just being kind of disregarded as like non-canon. Basically, it was discovered by accident thousands and thousands of years ago within the I think the Dead Sea Scrolls discovery, and I believe that was somewhere in Africa. I believe someone's going to correct me on here, I know, but feel free to do that. But yeah. Long story short, it was about the grandfather of Moses, going on the basis that Moses may have existed. And apparently his grandfather, called Enoch, described his experiences. He described a glass chariot, in his words, obviously translated into English as it is now, though, but yeah, a glass chariot descended from the sky and essentially picked him up and took him on a bit of a joyride, really. So these beings that he met on this glass chariot showed him what we would now just describe as the solar system. And he described the positions of Jupiter and Mars and Saturn and so on thousands of years before Galileo Galilei even began to propose the fact that the entire solar system doesn't rotate around the Earth at its centre.
Right.
Most of it does around the sun. So that in itself is crazy. The fact that scroll was just sat there, just decaying over time, and somebody happened to discover it. And I can't say whether that's true or not, though, but I've read a lot of it myself, and it's made me question, well, this has been around for longer than we think. And if people could, back then, we didn't have spaceships. We barely even had ships that could even sail across great waters back then. How on earth can that person get into space to see the solar system, maybe meet some interesting beings and head back home for a cup of tea? So to me, it's a fascinating story, really. And it does have some interesting links to the Knights Templar as well, because I do believe that's part of their story, though. But I would love to do an episode on that at some point. Maybe speak to someone more expert than myself, really. But so yeah, I don't know if you ever have time in the future. I'd recommend just having a quick read of it, really, and just making your own opinions on that. But it's just, to me, it seems like it's another piece of evidence that details contact in our past.
It's interesting that in the late 60s, I think the Daily Mirror or the Sunday Mirror serialised Chariots of the Gods. That's something I read with interest, and I got the book when it came out, sort of late 60s. And it seemed plausible that a lot of the biblical and historical events recorded these things. I think the problem is with the Bible, a lot of these stories are kind of symbolic and not meant to be regarded in a literal fashion. I think like Ezekiel's vision of his wheels and eyes can be interpreted in lots of different ways. And now scientists did interpret it in terms of a spaceship. But I think in the 19th century, somebody interpreted it in terms of an airship. So we interpret things in terms of our own culture and society and expectations. So in a way, when you look at, say, rock art and other representations that look alien to us, it's just that we're looking at things from our space age viewpoint, and some of these things that we think might be UFOs in cave paintings might be just symbolic representations of the sun or the moon, or we could just be squiggles just for decorative purposes. We're reading them as aliens. So I think that's the danger of really old historical material. I still think it's fascinating because it's got integrated into the old UFO mythology, really, that, these things have been going on for centuries, not thousands of years. And also you got to look at the fact that even in the Bible, these were human experiences. So people were having odd experiences, and how we describe them is very much down to the context of, say, religion or our own secular viewpoint. I think there's a good point that, because religion's not so important now, there's this kind of vacuum, and the UFOs have filled this vacuum. So in a way, I shouldn't have been surprised when I investigated these high strangeness cases that were referred to the Book of Revelation, and that, a lot of these things people were seeing were probably the sort of things that might have been seen in biblical times and interpreted in terms of visions from God or messengers from God, rather than messages from Mothon or whatever the alien name is that the contactee gives them. So I think it's fascinating, really, because even the stories of George Adamski and his fellow contactees, they do look a bit rubbish to us nowadays, especially since their flying saucers seem to be just like the flying saucers of that period. They're very clunky, and we've got levers and dials and all that sort of thing, which is the sort of thing you saw in films of that period. And even the Betty Barney Hill abduction, they're not levitated out of their bed into a craft. They actually are stopped by this UFO on the ground and literally dragged inside it. In a way, you don't get that kind of case anymore.
Yeah, it's all kind of building and building and building, and it seems to be at this. I mean, I haven't been alive long enough to see the last the fad, essentially, because when everybody was really obsessed, looking at it in sort of the 60s, and even my previous regular co-host Christine, like, she was there, like she recounts kind of her time watching the moon landings on the TV when she was a little girl, and what an amazing experience that must have been, really. But now it seems to be there's this resurgence where people are, like I say, questioning nature of reality and questioning their government, as they're now seeing things more directly with their own naked eye now. Don't really make any kind of sense. So at least to me, it seemed like there was a turning point recently where I think his name was David Grush, spoke to US Congress. So my understanding of that is when you're under oath, should you say anything that could be proven to be a lie, then that would then be subject to various legal recurrences, basically, things that will kind of ultimately destroy their career and their freedoms. So there's a lot on the line there, really. So David Grush speaking in the Congress quite directly, and I remember, I think it was Nancy Mace, she asked him directly, were there biologics on the craft that was recovered, and he was describing his reports of a crashed aircraft out somewhere in the Nevada desert, I believe. But anyway, he simply stated, yes, there were non-human biologics recovered on the craft. So they had actually taken the DNA sequences from this craft and saw that it did not match the human DNA sequence. So that in itself, to say it so directly and boldly, I don't think I've ever seen that myself before. I don't know if you can say anything else about that, though, but that was my first time where I thought, actually, this is beginning to enter the popular space now, as in, like, people seem to be more accepting, more open to this now. But that should have been all over the news, really. Like, once that happened, a few news articles were made, a few interviews were done, but that was it. But shouldn't that not have been treated as the greatest story in human history so far? It's wild, really. So, yeah.
It's frustrating, though, because a lot of these whistleblowers are coming out telling stories like that, but then they cover the evidence by saying, they can't say what they know because they're covered by the Official Secrets Act, or, I know, but I can't tell you because of X, Y, and Z. So it's very frustrating. And all they can say is there is evidence, or they've seen evidence, or they've seen photographs, etc. But we can't actually wheel that out into the public light. So it's all a bit of a smoke and mirrors, really. And I think another problem with it is you're getting people going on the bandwagon with these stories as well. And it's very hard to know which ones are true and which are not. I think that's another thing when people have been looking at government sort of cover-ups and things. Some people in government do believe that there are UFOs or that things have been retrieved, but then they never said, yes, I've spoken to X, Y, and Z, and they believe it too. But it's a bit of a word of mouth thing, and people are spreading stories based on gossip, and that's a basic problem with it. Until somebody actually wheels it out, I suppose, and then it would be actual disclosure. But until that time, it's just a lot of whispering, and there's all these stories like bombshell things going on, like Skinwalker Ranch or somewhere. There's always something that's going to crack the old subject. But this has been going on since the 60s, that Donald Keogh was always saying that, disclosure was on its way, and he put pressure on the government just the way they're doing now. So it's nothing really new. It's just that it's been rebranded as UAPs and non-human intelligence. I'm a bit skeptical and cynical of the whole thing, because this is...
It's understandable. Yeah.
People as well on the internet say, well, I believe him, and then others said, well, this has been going on for 5 or 6 years already, and nothing's come of it. Anyways, I think there's that excitement, say 2 or 3 years ago, of something's going to come out and blow the whole subject wide open, and it was a sort of media sensation even now, I suppose, but not so much in the mainstream media, more in terms of being on the internet. So I think in a way it's better if you just plough your own field. Like, you can go out and investigate cases, because the government can't stop you having alien contacts if there are aliens out there. Like people in my book, they've had all these experiences related to alien contact and communication. Whatever it is, the government couldn't and cannot stop you having these experiences. It's a bit like Close Encounters movie by Spielberg. The military wanted to just meet the aliens on their own terms, but the aliens contacted civilians to come to the landing site as well. That's quite an interesting way of depicting the UFO subject, and that there was government cover-up ideas even in the late 70s. I think, mainly inspired by Watergate, that the government did all sorts of nasty things without people knowing. And in a way, that was a brilliant way of showing that it didn't really matter to the aliens who get to civilians without, and the military couldn't do anything about it. And like I said earlier, a lot of these important cases always seem to be linked with the American military. Why is it always centred on them? Is it that they're more obsessed with UFOs and that sort of subject, more likely to talk about it and try and investigate it? Or, do they know UFO secrets, or is it all, misinformation and deception by the CIA?
Yes.
All sorts of areas of the subject, and I think that's what keeps me interested. There's so many different elements to it, and you don't really have to be a believer in all these things. I don't think you should be a total debunker either. I think there's a sort of middle way, and pursue the subject in the way that pleases yourself, really, and doesn't send you too mad.
No, because it can, to me, nowadays I kind of question, like, when will it be enough for people to go, okay, I'm now beginning to understand what this thing truly is? Because have you heard about the recent news events where I think they had the Nazca mummies in New Mexico, I think it was? I need to check that. And the Buga spear. So have you heard about those two events?
I've heard about the Beluga sphere, yeah. But it's a bit too contrived to me, and it's promoted by...
It does. It almost seems too good to be true, doesn't it?
Yeah. For some reason, a lot of the South American cases always seem to be a bit dodgy. They always seem to find scientists to support these cases. So I'm not too convinced about it, mainly because of the source of the information. It always looks like a work of art rather than a sort of practical...
It does a bit, yeah. Because, well, for anyone that's watching that doesn't know about them, just to update you, so a little while ago, I believe the Mexican government unveiled these proposed alien bodies, and initially they weren't taken as seriously because they were saying, okay, well, maybe it's just a few animal parts put together. And initially it was kind of poo-pooed generally, and over time they managed to include some university researchers with various equipment that is able to look deeper into these bodies, and they discovered that certain metal pieces were in there, evidence of unborn children being in these bodies of some species, strange bone structures, and I mean, I don't know what they are, but clearly it kept coming back into the news for a reason. But I don't know whether it's because a certain narrative was being pushed, I just don't know. But these things seem to have these devices implanted into various parts of their body. Apparently they were saying they were still transmitting energy, as in like evidence of it via heat signatures, which is interesting. And also, the Buga sphere as well, that one seems even more too good to be true, because again, a similar part of the world, there's a video of this floating metal ball shooting around this open landscape, and this person recorded it suddenly dropping down to the floor. They went to pick up this object, and it's like a relatively perfect sphere, and it has these engravings in it, and they said that this odd sphere, I mean, it's strange that they just ran straight over to pick it up straight away, because normally wouldn't you be hesitant, like, that looks a bit odd, that was levitating a minute ago, why is it now not levitating? Is it dangerous? Could it be radioactive, for example? But no, when they went to study this thing, and supposedly it keeps increasing and decreasing in weight. When they pour water on it, it immediately evaporates without heat. It turns to steam. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, there could be just simple party tricks, and they're just using that to get attention, maybe. But either way, it seems to be sort of just Stephen Greer, and he seems to be one of the big faces of UFO disclosure. I don't know if he's legit or not. I mean, I was really into what he was saying a long time ago, but more recently I've been going to question, is he doing it for the right reasons? But either way, he got involved with the whole Nazca Mummies and Buga Spear situation, and he seems to be on board with it. He doesn't seem to be entirely against it, but I don't know. But what would be the goal of this, though? If it was a lie, is it meant to be a distraction? Like, I wonder, like, what is this meant to be? Because, we had a fad a while ago of having lots of these different alien movies. Like, think about it, Independence Day, Close Encounters, E.T. even. All these kind of dramatic movies. I love E.T., by the way. But all these kind of dramatic movies, they do kind of seem like distractions. It's like, okay, well, we're beginning to question about this particular mystery. Like, can we give you something to get you excited about? That would just kind of scratch that itch temporarily, I suppose.
You've got to question whether some of these things, like the mummies and things like that, they're either hoaxes to cash in on the subject, or perhaps people are creating them to put pressure on something like the American government to say, that's not true, but we do have a real thing, or make the government think we actually have obtained, alien evidence of some sort, to kind of put pressure on this campaign of disclosure. So, there's multiple reasons, and I think the old mummy thing, I don't think it's too convincing, because it's gone on for quite a while, and there were these famous photographic slides of an alien mummy that was attributed to Roswell, and they spent like 2 years studying it, and then within 2 days of it being on Facebook, internet searchers easily translated the inscription on the cabinet that the body was displayed in, and it was a conventional mummy of a child in a museum. So I think people can get carried away with mummies and fakery, really. And another aspect of all this, I was talking about American cases, that first impressed me, is that the further away a case is, the more convincing it seems to be. And there used to be loads of cases from South America in Flame Source Review, and there seemed to be a lot of enthusiasm about alien contacts in places like Brazil, which didn't really match up with a lot of the cases anywhere else. So I suppose you could argue they were getting a different alien species from elsewhere, but in a way there's that kind of cultural aspect to it. And perhaps, some stories would be more amenable to, say, South American media than to some US media or other countries' media. But there's that old thing about the further away in time, like Roswell, because it's so far back in time, it's something that it always has new dimensions added to it. It's hard to actually go into the basics anymore. They get confused. All the details get confused. It's same with Rendlesham. There's lots of stories being added to that original story. So it's really hard then 30 years later or whatever to actually disentangle what was going on at that time. And I think it's also something like you were talking about ghosts and the paranormal. As a UFO researcher, I'm more convinced paranormal things might happen. I've had a few spooky things happen to me, whereas I haven't really had any great UFO sighting or anything. And I was reading about Mark Gatiss. He says, he knows a lot about ghosts and paranormal, but he's more convinced by UFOs, which he doesn't know so much about. So sometimes you can know too much about a subject and realise that's a fake or that doesn't sound quite right. So the subject is kind of a difficult one to navigate, really. And like you say about the beluga spear thing, it just looks too contrived. But on the other hand, if it's too fuzzy and vague, you're not happy there. So in a way, I suppose, if somebody wants to convince someone like me, they're gonna be very frustrated because they think, I'm giving you this solid object and you won't believe it. And I'm giving you pictures of blobs which aren't convincing either. So
yes.
I think the only thing that did strike me was that I think it was one or two Chinese balloons came over to North America about 2 years ago, and they were actually shot down by air.
I saw that, yes.
And that struck me because it was on the, news headlines, UFOs shot down over America. It's just like out of Independence Day. But they were real tangible objects that were shot down, whereas with 99% of UFO sightings, they're elusive, like ghosts. They never shoot down things down, and if they do shoot them down, it's a weather balloon or something, So
yes, that may fall under the disinformation effort, really, because I think more people are seeing these things, and they're very quickly denounced as air balloons or. Yeah. It's just, someone was just flying sort of a hobbyist drone in the sky, and somebody mistook it for something dangerous and shot it down. But it seems to be that they're having to work extra hard recently to debunk all of these things because more and more people seem to be seeing things now. And but if it's okay, I hope to kind of end on a little story, if that's all right, because I promised to tell you a very strange UFO story linking to Russell Brand, if it's okay.
Sounds good.
I've been laughing about this one for the last couple of years and still can't figure it out. I'm not suggesting Russell Brand is an alien, though, but most of my experiences are kind of around kind of poltergeist activity, out-of-body experiences and stuff like that. I very rarely have seen UFO things, but this one really confused me. I can't explain it. All I can do is describe it. So, yeah, it was like a summertime evening. I forget exactly where it was, though, but basically we went to this place called, I think it's Tweedy Circus. And Tweedy, for anyone that doesn't know, is like, I think he's part of Zippo's circus. He's like one of his most famous clowns. And he was doing like this evening session where he kind of made his own little construction, like mini tents, and kind of trialed this new show before he kind of did his tour across the UK. And I felt really privileged to see that, and it was amazing. Yeah, we went to this tent, and it housed roughly about 100 people though, so not really big. And I sat down with my family, and this person walks through the tent, and I thought, that person looks like a Russell Brand impersonator. And I thought, okay, well, it can't be him, and he walked by me, and yeah, that was Russell Brand, and his family came by. And I get quite nervous around celebrities. I don't like, Mary Berry stood next to me once. I couldn't even have the courage to say hello, and I love Mary Berry. But anyway, I could see where he was with his family, so I thought, okay, it's be a bit rude for me to say anything though. So he went to sit on the other side of the tent and just had a great time. And but that kind of thing just never happens to me. It's so rare. I mean, like I said, I've only ever met 2 celebrities really, or technically met though, but didn't really meet them. But it's so rare, and just something felt off about that night, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Like, there's just a weird feeling the entire evening. Like, we had a great time, we had a laugh watching the show, but something just felt really odd, and I couldn't put my finger on it though. And I thought, okay, maybe it was to do with seeing Russell Brand. But no, yeah, eventually the show ended, and I saw Russell and his family walk out, and I thought, yeah, that's 100% definitely him. And yeah, we just walked back to our car, started making our way back home, and we started driving about a minute away from where this big field was, and this was out in the countryside, like I say. And as we were approaching this field, I saw this big shaft of metal in between 2 trees, and I thought maybe that a piece of debris was stuck in the tree line, or maybe balancing on some power lines. And I could see it glistening in the sun, so it was quite a smooth textured piece. And the closer I got to it, I realised that nothing was supporting it. It was just levitating in the air. It's about, if you imagine two heights of a car in heights. I'm terrible at maths and measurements, but if you imagine the height of like an average car twice over, that was the bottom of it, and the size of it was about the size of I'll say a small bus. We're talking about like lengthwise like that. So yeah, and it was like a shard to like a point at the bottom, and it shot up like this with it was like a diamond shape. But as we approached it, I went around it, and I could see it was a 3-dimensional object. You could tell there was some heft to it. It was quite weighty, but it was making no noise, no noise of propulsion or anything. And I kept looking at it thinking, is this real? This ridiculous? And I said to my wife, can you see that? And she said, no, I'm busy driving. Just don't distract me, because obviously we're in the middle of a place where we didn't really know very well. So obviously my wife was focusing on that. So she was distracted. My kids were doing their thing. I was looking at it thinking, like, I can't be the only person seeing this. It was so blatantly obvious. And I got to within about a couple of meters of it as we drove around it to take the next turning. And I watched it in the distance, just get further away. And I could see it was still there. It was still an object. And just as we got enough of a distance away, I can't give you a measurement of that though, but yeah, about a couple of roads away, I could see it just in the distance, and it just disappeared in an instant. It just like as if it just switched off, it just disappeared. I thought, well, maybe it could have been something in my glasses, like a reflection of the light, like for the setting sun, because it was like, summertime but evening time. But yeah, it's weird. Like, of all nights, why did I meet Russell? Why was Russell Brand in that one place? And then I saw it like it was my first UFO experience. Yeah. I was thinking, like, was it all a dream or something? Like, but why did I dream of Russell Brand of all people? Like, I'm not his biggest fan. I like him though, but yeah, not his biggest fan for many reasons. But yeah, it was odd. And I need to make sure I kind of share this story at some point in my sequel to my book. But yeah, it's just absolutely bizarre. But it just shows that people that aren't looking for it just experience it. Now, I know there are those out there that do this kind of CE5 contact things where they're able to summon or influence the activity of UFO contact. There are people like me, like you, like many others out there who maybe just not even thinking about these kind of things, and they're just thrust into it. So yeah, that's when I have big questions about, and I still believe it's more of the side of it being real because of how it felt being there in that moment.
I think like a lot of people who experience these things are not quite sure of their own senses.
Yes.
The question, did I really see that? And it does inspire awe as well, doesn't it? It's sort of like something really strange and out of the norm. Is there an explanation for it? Sometimes there are explanations.
Yeah.
But that sounds like a very difficult one to actually explain. And I think that's the thing when you actually hear somebody tell their story. it can be quite impressive, really. And so, I think your story just sounds like a lot of other people's, in the sense of how peculiar it was and how it sort of branded on your memory as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's only got me more, I'm more fascinated about it, and there could be so many different explanations. I'm pretty compass mentis, at least I think so anyway, so I like to think I know how to use the senses I currently have. Although, then again, I do have abilities where I can see these other kind of entities of sorts, but but I've also I've heard more and more conversations around the idea that poltergeist activity is linked to extraterrestrial contact as well. The fact that poltergeist could potentially be cross-dimensional entities. Have you ever heard people say that to you?
Yeah, I think we do link it with alien activity, and I think again in the early 70s, quite a few European researchers were kind of interested in the folklore and paranormal aspects of UFO encounters. I think there's a famous case of Dr. X, Amy Michelle investigated, and he claimed a lot of poltergeist activity happened in his house after he'd had a UFO encounter, and they even said that on one occasion he levitated towards the ceiling, but there's nobody else witnessed that, and nonetheless, a lot of people have said that they've had all these experiences, and also it runs in families. Often children or parents with grandchildren also report having seen UFOs or had odd psychic events occur to them. So I think it's on a kind of spectrum from poltergeist to UFOs, with all sorts of other things mixed in with it. I suppose if you're really hardcore nuts and bolts ufologist, you might say, that's all a load of nonsense and we should just keep to the solid cases. But I don't think you can really demarcate these things so strongly, because, all these stories are shaped by our beliefs in UFOs and how it's portrayed in the media and our own sort of social context and perhaps our own psychological viewpoints. Do we want to close ourselves off to these things? Like somebody could have easily seen what you saw and just say, oh, it's a reflection or something, and we'll just forget about it and drive
That's
on.
it, yes. Well, it seems like you have a very level head when it comes to dealing with these things. It's good to have a healthy amount of skepticism, as in like inquisition, trying to gather the facts and try to make an assessment. So I suppose to conclude this conversation, I'd love to ask you, Nigel, what do you think these things are?
That's $1 million question. I've gone from, kind of belief, I was complete skepticism. Now I'm on a sort of middle course, really. I'm just open to what people have reported to me. I suppose, in a way, you can be totally sceptical and say, this is all about culture, society and psychology. But on the other hand, you think, well, if there were aliens, they would mess with our minds and act just the way people have been reporting. So I'm kind of open to that, but I think it's good that it opens up inquiry into our place in the universe. And it could also help in the study of different psychological things like sleep paralysis or post memory syndrome, so, that could be very helpful in terms of just understanding more about our own human experiences. But, so I'm kind of open to the whole subject, and I just like, even though I don't believe much in this disclosure or different revelations in South America, I think they're fascinating because they never seem to die away, and that, they're all part of the subject, and to see where these stories go, what fascinates people. So it's all sort of all under the umbrella of ufology, really, and it does cover so much. Perhaps too much, some people would say, but that's a fascination.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, Yeah, long may you continue your adventure. But yeah, I have to always ask on the standard question as well. So where can people find your book? Is it available now? Is that correct?
Yes, it came out. Came out at the end of July, and you can get it on Amazon and most of our online retailers. And
yes,
you can find out a bit about me on Facebook. I've got my own Facebook page, but you can also look up UFO Investigations Manual as a page where I'm putting information about portraits of alien encounters revisited. So you can look me up on Facebook, or like I say, on you can also contact me on Gmail at Nigel Watson 1 at Gmail.
It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Like, this is something I could talk about for literal weeks. There's so much happening right now, and it's a very exciting time to be able to look further than our previous understanding of what was defined for us as a reality as we begin to break those barriers. And that seems to be, that's what the Paranormal Perspectives book range is about, really. Like, I know it's a strange coincidence, though, that my podcast has the same title as the book series, though, and that's purely a coincidence. So, because, of course, as you know, like, my book Paranormality is within that same book series, and all of us, it's about questioning the nature of reality, about breaking those old barriers and beginning to kind of ask those bigger questions as we kind of share these first-hand stories, really. So it's all fascinating, and part of that empowerment, really, of self, really, starting to learn more about this exciting world, the world of what was previously unknown. So yeah, maybe eventually we'll get to a point of full disclosure, and this will all be kind of common knowledge. I personally, if it's okay to say, like, my side of things, I'm more towards the end of thinking I do believe there is life out there. That's part of another story, which will take me forever to tell, though, but it all links into things my friends have seen ahead of time. I also have seen coming for quite some time, and it's all kind of coming to fruition, really. So I do kind of see where you are kind of heading in that direction. But I mean, the very fact that humans still exist, if these things I am correct and other people are correct, and these things are real, if they were to travel thousands of light years, even cross-dimensionally, it's fair to say that they'll have extremely advanced technology, and they could wipe us out in a nanosecond. The very fact that we're still here already implies their intention. So stay tuned. It was, I think, about Mork and Mindy, Nanu, I want to say, but I used to love that show. Thank you so much, Nigel, for being here. You've done a great job speaking tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time, and good luck with your book. And for any future stories you look to tell, I'll look out for you, for sure.
Yeah, and good luck with your book as well.
Yeah, I think I need. I'm a first-time author, though, so, and yeah, not as experienced, though, but I had an incredible, a very shocking story to tell, and it all makes sense when it comes out.
All right.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation, though, so thank you very much, and you take care, Nigel.
Okay. Right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Giving a voice to those without a choice, sharing dreams and blowing off steam. We'll lend you a hand, we'll let you stand, sharing stories about the unknown. Paranormal perspectives, we're here to inspect it. I'm a small, not a medium. Let us escape from this tedium, learning from each other, breaking barriers, a message of hope, birth from the unknown. Who you gonna call? I'm not a ghostbuster, no proton packs, just crossing streams of knowledge. It's not so scary when things get hairy. It's not the paranormal, just future normal. Breaking barriers, no longer the carrier, releasing the fear and replacing it with knowledge. Understanding each other, we uncover a whole new point of view within you. Paranormal perspectives, we're here to inspect it. I'm a small, not a medium. Let us escape from this tedium, learning from each other, breaking barriers, a message of hope, birth from the unknown. The only stream we need to cross is the platforms to get the message across. Knowing each other, sister to brother. No ghost or spirit or demon will ever get the better of this medium. Paranormal Perspectives, we're here to inspect it. I'm a small nut, a medium. Let us escape from this tedium, learning from each other, breaking barriers. A message of hope birthed from the